much. So, welcome, and thank you for coming out on a snowy evening, which are most of our evenings anymore. And thank you to Ars Poetica and to the library for hosting us. I am delighted to introduce my friend, James Benton, whose work I admire so much. By the way, I'm Donald Wolfe, for those of you who don't know me, and worked for a quarter century in the English writing program here. All right, back to Jim. He got his bachelor's degree here in English writing, and I had the pleasure of teaching him and his wife, Jeanette, who were the ideal students because they came prepared and engaged and interested and wanted to learn. So a lot of our students are like that, but that's like the definition of a good student. Jim got his MA in creative writing at Cal State Sacramento and is currently working on his MFA here at EOU, and deserves a lot of credit for having a book already before he's finished his MFA. At EOU, he teaches composition, which we get to discuss endlessly, and argumentation, and we argue endlessly, and creative writing, which we enjoy endlessly, and integrative studies, which is cross-disciplinary, and in our version involves a close study of the connections between whiskey and cigars. Jim has an impressive background in what I call the world of work. He was a Navy nuclear technician, so I have him come fix the heater in our house. Shipyard electrician. He was in debt collections, which sounds like fun. Credit card security, private investigations, and a poet. So that's fairly integrative. He's here to read from his just published book, Sailor, which is grounded in our everyday world, which is utterly transformed by his imagination. We encounter in his work a formidable intelligence. The book is divided into 7 sections, each with an epigraph and picture. Epigraph, well, you can't see. I mean, if I were you, I couldn't see, but there's the epigraph. You can see the picture. And each section has one. And here's one. No, that's his picture. Actually, you'll soon see not as handsome. I thought about leaving that joke out. Okay. There's a wide variety of poems, many short-line poems in this collection, a few prose poems, some pushing the page into uncharted territory, like Fire, which we had to negotiate with a publisher, right, to get the line spacing correct, and forces us to turn the book a different way, wakes us up. And a poem called The Art of Lying, which is a palimpsest. And so, for those of you who don't know, a palimpsest is something that's been written over. You can still see the original, so you had to figure out a way to represent that on the page. So you can see the poem there, and then you can see the traces. So you gotta figure out how to all his poems are marked by sharpness and precision of image, of line, of voice, a great cogency, and precision, sharpness, cogency, my favorite compliment to writers in first-year composition. But it's nice to see it here too. The poet, Joshua McKinney, sums up Sailor in this way: from dusty ports of call to colorful bazaars to amorous liaisons in dark rooms, these powerful poems navigate the full range of human emotion. And our own inimitable and accomplished David Axelrod attest to what's to be found in this book, beautiful and enchanting as the aftermath of a great storm. So I think if there's time at the end, you'd be willing to answer some questions and be willing to sell books, or is that too egocentric tonight? No, you're going to go with it? Okay, great. So I am happy to bring up my friend Jim Benton.
Thank you. I think I'll start just by digging in. So Donald mentioned that the book is broken up into 7 sections, and these 7 sections I think of as ports of call. And so rather than thinking about the arc of these poems as chronological, so each one of them sort of loosely adheres to a theme that I associate with some of the various places that I visited in my 6-year undistinguished military career. I should say that my military career started 45 years ago, and so by now the statute of limitations has expired. Yeah, I think if I had been caught doing some of the things that I did in the Navy, I might still be in Leavenworth. I don't know. But it started way before that. Somebody said, "What's the first memory you have?" This is the first memory that I have. This is called On 39th Street. In the spring, I drive a plastic car up and down my parents' knees while they lay in bed. It's dark. This wakes them, and we drive up and down the covers until breakfast. We eat plums from the backyard tree, thick purple flesh. The woman next door never comes outside. She yells if we play too close, too loud. Her window screens smell like dust under a parent's bed. Across the street, Pearl wears black dresses with white lace at the neck. Thin Frenchie smells of something like sour milk, gone tired in the open air too long. You know them. Their porcelain terriers guard the porch. Glass giraffes graze at bowls of hard candy no one eats. Plastic cars line the mantel. They give me one, and they talk with my mother about plums and dust. A boy swings his arms, same time, front to back, as he walks down the street. Arms like sympathetic neighbors scraping their metal rakes, piling fall leaves in great rotting mounds for the city to haul away. I ask my mother, what's wrong with him? Nothing, she says. He just likes to do it that way, and that settles it. When I climb behind the wheel of my father's big car, set it rolling down the drive into Pearl and Frenchie's yard, the woman next door uses one arm to open the door, the other to pull me out. She yells. Her hard fingers smell of plums. So that's beginnings. Most of these poems don't necessarily deal directly with seafaring or the Navy, but this one does. It's called Give Me a Flag. There's actually 2 versions of this. This is the first version, Give Me a Flag. I declare myself guilty of never having to take action, to live in transparency. Aimless, I roam among revisions, seeking someone who touches stone and does not return power to the sea. Unknown by hands that work only with tools. Hard, here in the tree it sings, the hand is the word making use of my body. I was going to crumple up this word in this ship when I was very young. I went astray in the world when victory came too late. My brothers do not know how I witnessed the quietude of poverty. I burned nothing but a bitter sheet of paper at the edges of exactitude, asking who started this war that repeats itself once every humid springtime. It is ink that occupies me, not to strike a blow of fire, to pound in the morning. The day is flat, made smooth by your apathy. Give me a flag's mute strength, the trees tell me. I tell my hands so many things about how a sea is made, how it worked hard to keep still, knowing one hand makes a mutiny. I think one of the best war movies ever made is Full Metal Jacket. And the reason it's so good is the first half of it absolutely captures the experience of boot camp. It absolutely captures it. No movie has ever captured it more accurately. So this isn't Full Metal Jacket, but it is Sailor. 1. Herded from airport to bus, the riot windows wired shut. From bus to bunkhouse, rows of empty bunks, wall to wall. Herded in a single file past a steel mesh window, told to write our last address on a label they tape on a box. I have only one bag, which they put in a box and ship home. Herded to the 3rd floor and seated in rows, whispering together in low light, we shift, elbow to shoulder, for an inch more space and hunker into ourselves. Our eyes dart through the dark for a sign, and we sniff at the air. The smell of apricots rises from the floor. 2. He stomps into the room, one foot dragging to the podium where he waits wordlessly for quiet. Who is this man with his beard like Ahab, cocking his white hat to the back of his head? With his weight on his good leg, he unloads his stories. His thick hand stabs the podium until it cracks. He is the Nome of Thailand, the Popeye of Guam, Narcissus of Midway and the South China Sea. Sent to redeem us from squalls west of Singapore and lead us not into port calls of women and drink. As though he already knows us by name, kindred and willing, tamed and lulled, he talks of honor and duty and grief until 2 in the morning when our eyes quit darting and adjust to the dark. The dangerous smell like apricot fades from the room, and we dock a few merciful seconds of sleep at the end of day 1. 3. We learn a fresh new language. A floor is a deck, while hatches are holes in a deck, not a wall, which turns out is a bulkhead, and the head is where a company goes to shower and shave. Heel to toe is now nut to butt, so the line to the galley is quiet and quick. Our black shoes are sky blue unless there are clouds, and then they are white. Gasping and sore, we are running through Georgia, not in boots, but in boondockers, in covers, not hats. We drill on the grinder with pieces, not rifles. Our clothing is gear we stow up to and touching. Everything stenciled and newly named in case we forget. Names like Droughty, Dennison, Siebing, Penn, Gunderson, Miller, Bullington, Groot. So in terms of ports of call, one of the places that I ended up once was Hong Kong, and we got on a my strategy when I went to foreign places was to watch where all the other sailors went as they went on leave, and then go the other way. Because they were going to find a bar or a strip club or a KFC. Now, if I wanted to go to KFC, I don't have to go to Hong Kong to do that. I'm going to Hong Kong, I'm going to go see some Hong Kong. So I got on the ferry from Hong Kong Island, went across to Kowloon, and I thought, well, here's a map, and there's this thing called the Temple of the 10,000 Buddhas. Let's go see that. So I bought a ticket, me and my friend. We got on the train and promptly missed the stop to the Temple of the 10,000 Buddhas. Next thing you know, because none of us can read Chinese or speak Chinese. Next thing you know, the conductor is saying, last stop, everybody off. Well, I'm looking at the last stop, and we're like an inch away from mainland China, us and our green cards. You could see it from over there, and if I got in the wrong taxi, I was afraid it was going to start an international incident. So we ended up in this little place that was billed itself as a forbidden city, and was walled in. Maybe about, the whole city was about the size of the library here. Big, thick walls. And I got a tour from this delightful 12-year-old girl who was explaining to me how the place had just been opened up to the public after something like 3,000 years of being completely walled in. Now, I don't know how true that is, but it sure made the trip. So this poem came out of that. It's called Ivory and Opium. The dragon has abandoned this place. The stone gate fallen from the wall. Unguarded, the shrines smoke, empty and wooden as my grandfather's first memory of the old ones when the dragon watched and kept the stone strong. In this archway here, their bony spindles by oil glow tossed the tiles. Their incense drew me as a boy from the shadowed corner to watch. Hot stems hung steaming from their contented grins. In this way, I was to pass the ivory and opium down to my son. I would show you the old coins, or the broken tortoise shells. The bronze is dead, the yellow ivory brittle as it falls. The dragon unhinged this place long ago. Let's see. So I thought, okay, how can I write a poem about this one particular experience without really saying anything about the experience itself, but just sort of dropping in the images, and let's see how it turns out. This is called Indian Ocean Day 3. A bass breaks free of gravity ahead of the storm. Sailors scramble fore to aft, bracing for a wash of green foam loaded with debris, a rage of rain. Beyond the cold fusion of hydrogen, oxygen, and salt, a profusion of fish and phosphor slaps against the steel. Primordial soup clings to the painted skin in grit layers like finely lacquered emery paper, glinting in the hard rain. The whole edifice tips on an axis adrift, a compass misaligned, a plate askew, a chair on end, a door flailing too near a sleeping outstretched arm. Some riders harness themselves to a rack. Others shim themselves into wedges hard against the heaving sea. Some read lurid books, write letters home to mother. Hands like knots pulled thin and white around a rope. Engines groan against their own reluctance. The ship lurches upward, hangs for an ictus of time, then plunges forward while a sea bass breaks across the bow. Well, I hadn't planned on reading this one, but I'm going to anyway. It came from, I was in a poetry class of David's, and I misheard one of the fellow students say something, and it's not what she said, but what I heard was Picasso was an X-Man. And I thought, how great is that? That's the best title I've ever heard, so I better write that poem before somebody else does. And, for 2 years I thought, well, this is going to be, no, that's terrible. Oh, let's try it this way. No, that's terrible. And I don't know. One day I was just thinking about it, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd had too much, to do. I was in that sort of weird space. I thought, well, let's see. Picasso was an X-Man, and this came out, and I changed not a word. I hope it's not as terrible as the rest of it. Anyway, Picasso was an X-Man. That first stroke made them look. How it began, low and to the left, from an athletic squat, and then rose like the trajectory of artillery fire as he stood, recalling news of Guernica, how he swooped the arm, turned the hip, balanced the weight of the line on the ball of his foot, shifting like crosswind and rage until there it was, perfect arc, in perfect proportion to his pain, blind, drunk, and effortless. Okay, so this one I'm just going to read. It's called Cousins. I'm going to move this down a little bit too. Sorry about the popping. I don't know, is that any better? I hope so. Okay, so Cousins. The epigraph is, with all thine offerings thou shalt offer salt. This is from Leviticus. Tell me if it was tell me if it was the rock salt or the tannins leached from the oak barrel that dried your heart. Beside the shed, 4 years old, laughing, we ate handfuls of the stuff, drawn by an urgent sting to suck the rain off the clean edges. I was amazed by your disjointed thumbs, your teeth lightning white and horse grin wide. You begged from hunger on the car trip back from fishing, fed hay to horses in your backyard, leaped hooting into the pool. In the dark, you lit a flashlight in your mouth, tooth shadow, vein pulse, pumpkin shell. This is how I know you. Perhaps in time, the orange rust that stained the salt stained your tongue, and like a dry poultice, pulled away your resolve, pure rock shot through with seams. Were you thirsty, salt-washed, rock salt cooled, rock hard? Did it grind away your teeth, melting in your cheeks? Did it sharpen your blood, nick your veins from inside? Did it streak your dry bone hide with years of raw salt and scrub your dreams to a crust of flecks? Tell me, what alchemy of rust and rain and oak drew you, the way a poultice draws a nettle's urgent sting, to a hidden copse of aspen shuddering between the rain above and the salt below, where you cooled the iron barrel against your raw salt tears and stained the ground orange shot through. So, how are we doing for time? All right, so this one's called Oceanus Pacificus. And I was thinking about, I don't know if you've ever been at sea, if you're steaming underway and you're sitting on the fantail, this is the back side of the ship, and you're watching the wake sort of go behind you. It looks like a tail, and it goes on for a mile or 2 miles, all right? And it's just off. And there's this strange sense when you're at sea, because there's no other landmarks. It's just this sort of wavering, indistinct line between the sky that may be the color of these chairs and the ocean that's about the same color, and it's 360 degrees. It's all around you, and there's no McDonald's, there's no signs, there's none of that. And so if it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you're sitting on the fantail watching this thing, you tend to get philosophical. All right, Oceanus Pacificus. And see how our long churn recedes beyond the eye to the goblet rim. Who can doubt its curvature? The wavering chop, the interzone of brine and breath luminescent below the sun. How broad the chasm of this pinched perspective we believe our power enough to preserve us, to deny our nature to fall, and all our effort to remain afloat, impaled upon the grace of an indifferent sea. Our boiling tail, the trace of our transit, hisses until the last ear sinks below its unstill yawning gape. Hubris rides the slippery spine, world without witness, to discover for once if beyond here dwell dragons. So I'd like to read a couple of things that are new. This one's called Gun, a meditation on the weather. Our plateau above the river winding under cobalt skies, breaks like thunder, breaks and breaks apart. A murder of crows, astride the wire, guard their territory marked by glinting shards, some plums, and foil. A feathered braying, an alarm, a sign. Stephen came the other day to visit and pretend to offer restitution. But for what, we don't recall. We drank a glass of Jameson's to the joy of having played guitar together once. This stony road often slips into invisibility. The tinnitus of tires on asphalt mingles with the scent of sage. Do not offer up your prayers, those empty shoes, those bent stems, that cracked glass stained and staring. Before Stephen left, he promised not to let such distance come again between us. It was not a lie, not yet. So sometimes politics drives people apart. This one's called Contemporary Contretemps with Relatives. One day, one dark asteroid of a day, and it's coming soon. One of us will bloom at the seams like powder and bricks and beg to take it all back. The last time we spoke, ruptured the membrane though. In no time, bits of shattered syllables bashed themselves on a windshield sailing past the Joshua trees in August. All we had left at the end was the weather and a bad connection. Nothing I understand explains it. You see razor wire and thank the gods the heathens are at bay. Your conscience must believe a spruce demands the bite of its own axe. It must believe blanched rice stands in for marriage vows. It must revere the honor of thieves, the healing power of carnival glass, and pyrite in the salt box. Your conscience must believe that copper wire arrives on clouds of camphor carried through the mist by storks. We are syncopating past our counterpoint, you and I. Red shifting to the finish line, one battered phone call at a time. To excuse this contraposed year of ours, this catalog of the ridiculous, my conscience must believe that tender bits of grief today inoculate us from much larger grief to come. I must believe in bitter ways of letting go, convinced that this is what is meant by mercy. Okay, so I'm going to end with a couple of poems, hopefully on a much lighter note. So this one I call Karaoke in the Park with Diamonds. Under a clear sky, you sing like broken glass. A squirrel darts across the lawn of your voice in search of seeds or maybe safety from the cats. The karaoke machine bolsters you with violins. Cellos scoop you up and lift you in their mother's arms. You rise just short of the note they give you, wobbling in your soft, flat shoes and tremulous voice, almost but not quite there. My love for music makes me wince for you, for the empty backup band playing to impossible, hopeless stardom. And then I see how you let your eyes flutter and close. Tilt your head a bit to the right. Lean forward, knowing the microphone will not let you fall anywhere but into the arms of those cellos holding you aloft. You hit every word of that terrible song, perfect as a bullet. And I wish I had a voice held by cellos and rising. If you've ever driven down Adams Avenue, you might be able to relate to this. It's called right-of-way. It's a pet peeve of mine. No? Okay. I stopped for Elmer Bunge on my way to the hardware store, me in my SUV, he with his gout gimping from parts department to car lot. The moon stopped orbiting the earth. While he crossed the westbound lane, the double yellow line, the left turn lane, poking at the ground with his wooden crook stick, as if to ensure the firmament held through the eastbound lane to the curb. Elmer can't help it, I think, as I scan the rearview mirror, hoping not to see some jacked and ported pickup truck with two black dogs surfing the flatbed, jowls flopping in the wind, the driver checking out his girlfriend while she points frantically ahead. But Elmer has the right-of-way, a rule so firmly set in asphalt now that consequences take a back seat. Some rules are not Hammurabi's doing. So, what was it, last week, the week before, I was at the AWP conference, and a woman came by the table, and she picked up my book, and she just opened it and started reading, and then she did one of these. And I thought, I know exactly which poem she's reading. So I'll read it to you, and I'll close with that. This one's called Midway Women's Bowling League. And I should tell you that this is essentially a true story, but it has nothing to do with me. All right, Midway Women's Bowling League. We didn't call him Stinky yet. That came after Shore Patrol shut the drunken picnic down, and he chose to dash naked across 8 lanes of hardwood, dodging sniper fire bowling balls, women shooting at this pink and fuzzy arcade target scampering out the back door where Sanders was supposed to be with the clothes but wasn't, and the next move hadn't quite been planned, so he improvised, flapping, bare feet on concrete, slapping, before the women howling, before the sirens closing in, before, thinking naked was a joke and failing to plan ahead, he jumped the levee into the muck, and how they returned him to us, wearing only his new hero's name. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll take questions. About.
On average, how long does it take to write a book?
One of them took 25 years. It really all depends. It's not the kind of thing that you can just dash off, at least not without leaving traces of it having been dashed off. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, you have to go through some revision. Sometimes I'm revised more than others, to better or worse effect. So there's no rule about that. There was another poem that in here that seemed to work out pretty good. It published in a journal. It's in the book. I gave myself the challenge to write blank verse, just unrhymed iambic pentameter, and no fewer than 23 lines. I'm writing again. Got down to the end. I have not yet changed a word. I'm happy with it. But that's the really rare exception. Really rare exception. Yeah. That's a good question. So a lot of times I'll start out with, particularly in this book, I say, okay, what do I want to say about Singapore? And so I would start out with an idea. Oh, I want to talk about this event. All right, so I would start writing about that event, but about 3 or 4 lines in, the poem seems to want to go someplace else. There's an association of one word that leads to the next, and then that leads to the next, or an image pops up that seems more interesting than the original idea that I had, so I'm going to follow that. So as often as not, the poem has nothing to do with what I started out intending for it, and those end up usually being the best. The ones that are completely failed poems and that I throw away are the ones that I just kind of try to force into the idea that I'm trying to say, and those never work. They come across sounding like I'm preaching or wagging my finger or some other kind of didactic gesture that is unpleasant for everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm really pleased to see this many faces, and I'm thrilled to be here. So thank you for having me, and thank you for your attention.